Having been interested in acid and other hallucinogens in the past, but being unable to obtain them, when I found out about diphenhydramine, I was immediately interested. So, one night, when I didn't have school the next day, I bought a pack of Benadryl allergy. My roommate was in the room for the trip, but unaware that I was tripping. I didn't want to alarm him, he wouldn't have turned me in, but I didn't want to be a bother, but I figured, if worse came to worse, he would be there if I needed him. I started off slow, with 10 tablets, 250 milligrams. After about an hour or so, nothing happened. It was at this time that my roommate turned off the lights and went to bed, only lights now being from the window, and my computer. I took 2 more tablets, and waited half an hour. Having read another report, and computing the dosages taken, I took 5 more tablets, for a total of 425 milligrams in my system. Then, I lay down and waited for it to begin. My limbs were trembly, and spasmed every now and then. Laying down was very uncomfortable. About a half hour later, the ceiling took on a weird gelatinous appearance, consistent with other reports. I then decided to get up, and listen to a little music. I didn't hear any distortion of the music, but I could hear my name being called over it. After turning off the music, I turned to see a black woman in a cape and a large fur hat sitting next to my roommate. She explained to me that he was very sick, and that she needed to heal him. She also told me not to be alarmed, so I turned back to the computer. This episode took about a half hour. At this point, the trip turned nasty. I can't explain why, although I believe it may be because the additional 5 pills hit my system. I am notorious for leaving dirty dishes around the room, and the light from my computer fell on one of them, but it wasn't normal. It was moving. On closer inspection, it was filled with thousands of clear baby spiders. I screamed, but it was only in my head, as my roommate didn't wake up. Looking away, I tried to focus on the computer. I felt something brush my foot, but didn't look down. However, I saw a flicker of movement near the edge of my desk. Slowly, what looked like a huge, furry pipe cleaner rose up from the edge. It then tensed itself, and pulled up a giant wolf spider, whose body was about the size of my head, with gigantic legs. Looking away, I could see 4 or 5 more of them, all running very fast, like cheetah speed, along the floor. Gritting my teeth, I slipped on my shoes, and ran quickly outside my room. I was in the main hall of my floor, where it was considerably brighter. Now I was fully locked in a delusional reality. I went to the bathroom nervously checking around for spiders. Urination was painful, but was over quickly. I went to the drinking fountain, drank, and heard a growl from my left. There was a blue tabby cat, with distorted features and big fangs. It growled at me, and ran very fast and leapt at me. I put up my arm, and it exploded in mid-air. The fragments turned into long, beaked flatworms, with beady red eyes. They huddled together, and screamed shrilly at me. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them, they were gone. I couldn't stay in this hallway, but was not about to go back to the spiders. Opening up my door confirmed that they were still there. I decided to go into the main lounge of the building, into public, or at least, public at 1:30 a.m. Running quickly down the stairs, I reached the lounge with no more events. I sat down for a moment, because I was badly dizzy and my heart was racing. I would have measured my pulse, but I didn't have a clock nearby. 3 people walked by, and asked what I was doing. I said that I couldn't sleep, and that I was down here to keep from waking up. Both my voice and theirs sounded hollow and echoey, and I was slurring very badly. They eventually gave up, and walked away. I'm almost sure that they were real, because closing my eyes didn't remove them, although it didn't remove the spiders either. I paced around the lounge for a while, but upon seeing a pair of spiders fighting, normal-sized ones this time, I walked quickly in the opposite direction. I found out shortly that I was walking in the direction of the most horrifying hallucination yet. Reaching a series of benches, I was about to sit down, when I saw movement. Under the bench, in the shadows, was a large, bumpy shape. I moved a little to see what it was. I couldn't scream. It was a giant crab, about the size of my torso, excluding legs and claws. The claws were about the size of my arms, and clicked together horribly. It had a pug's face, with beady yellow eyes. One of the worms from before, now brown, protruded from the back of the shell. There were other, smaller, more normal crabs behind it. One of the claws would spasm from time to time. Although I had no grip on time, I must have stared at it, barely breathing, for 10 minutes or more. I ran full speed back to where the spiders were battling. It was then that I realized that one of them was not a spider at all. It was one of the worms, this time green, with thousands of gossamer thin legs, than it used to spin silk into thin nets and lassos. I saw about 4 or 5 more of them through the course of my trip. I spent the rest of the night pacing back between these two horrors, until I could see the sun coming up outside. I then went back to my room, where the spiders had disappeared, and went promptly to bed. I can't remember if I dreamed or not. The next day, I felt very fatigued, and my arms shook, like Parkinson's disease. I felt very sick to my stomach. No hallucinations persisted, although I had trouble balancing, and sometimes seemed to slip while walking. These symptoms faded after a few hours. Although this was a terrible, nightmarish experience, I've not ruled out using it again, after some time has passed, probably at a lower dosage as well. Should a second bad trip occur, it will likely end my experimentation with this drug. However, I cannot, in good conscience, recommend this experience to anyone else. This definitely has a harsh quality about it, even without the nightmarish hallucinations. Would note, the dose described in this report is very high, potentially beyond Irowin's heavy range, and could pose serious health risks or result in unwanted, extreme effects. Sometimes extremely high doses reported are errors rather than actual doses used. Mindset: relaxed, no pressing concerns or anxiety. My mood I'd describe as my usual upbeat and contented feeling in that period of my life. The setting was my home at that time, so I felt comfortable and at ease. I was on my own and expecting no interruptions or people dropping around. It was around 11 p.m. on a weekend, Saturday I think, summertime, so the weather was warm, calm and usual for this part of Australia at this time of year. To summarize, I felt safe and secure, no concerns and comfortable. During that period of my life, I was not taking any other medications, supplements or vitamins and had not for years prior. I was, however, a little bored, which may help explain why I decided it was a good idea to take 30 mg of scopolamine and 1000 mg of diphenhydramine. In explaining my experience it gets really challenging, as the concept of time kind of lost any meaning to me. 1 second may as well have been 1 hour, the terms of time and the passing of time were absolutely meaningless to me at that point. Another difficulty in trying to describe my experience was the blackouts. There are periods that I cannot account for, that I have zero recollection of. Therefore, rather than trying to guess what I may have done or felt during these blackout periods, I'll just type what I definitely know happened. So in these blackout periods, the only thing that I knew for certain was that I didn't know, thus I'll leave those periods blank. The scopolamine was in the form of 100, 300 microgram tablets and the DPH was in the form of 20, 50 mg gel caps. All are available OTC in Australia at that time. I had not taken scopolamine or diphenhydramine for many years and never in combination or at these doses. Nor had I taken any other drug or supplement that day or month prior. I took the lot orally with water and sat in my recliner waiting to see what may happen. D+15 minutes. Beginning to feel a haziness, like a wavy dullness within my consciousness, nothing crazy or alarming. D+45 minutes. The hazy feeling has intensified and is continuing to intensify at an accelerating rate. Not feeling any alarm or concern. D+60 minutes. I could barely form a thought, my brain feels like it's wrapped in bubble wrap, and I had to fight my way out to think or speak. I began feeling an urgent need to think about something, perhaps a thought like where's my cell phone. I'd then stand up and after taking 2 or 3 steps I would wonder where it is I am walking to, and why the hell am I walking there in the first place. So I'd go back and sit down only to do the same thing all over again and this repeated over and over. D+75 minutes. I could no longer form coherent thoughts whatsoever. It was like a jumbled mix of thoughts and words in my mind that made no sense, yet somehow I felt there was something I urgently needed to do, but just couldn't remember what it was. It felt just like when one struggles to recall something and can't, yet it felt like it was on the tip of my tongue. I don't recall feelings like anxiety, fear or alarm. In fact, I don't recall feeling anything at all. Now that didn't mean that I felt good, bad or anything else. It means that the thought of feeling just didn't even enter my consciousness. D plus approximately 180 minutes. It feels like I basically just arrived on the planet, as in just born, with no thought of before this moment even existing, why I should be where I am or what I'm trying to do. I came out of blackout walking down a highway. Like literally, as, in 1 second, there is nothing then, bam. Here I am walking along a highway wearing nothing but board shorts and socks, no shoes. Even though I was likely just a mile or so from my house, I was completely lost both geographically and mentally. I walked aimlessly for what seemed like hours but could not find my home. I remember feeling sad and anxious and hopeless that I couldn't find my way home, and for periods I recall thinking that this is forever and I will be lost forever. At this point I was still unable to form coherent thoughts and felt very lost. For a while I'd intermittently disappear back into the unconscious blackness and then reappear for a moment. plus approximately 240 minutes. I finally found my street, by accident, and then my home. I recall an overwhelming sense of finally I'm safe again. After this, I pretty much just sat on the lounge and waited for effects to wear off. Were there any hallucinations, auditory or visual? There was occasional wall-breathing visuals but they were minor and intermittent. I don't recall any auditory hallucinations. There was no nausea or vomiting, no euphoria, no headaches, GI distress or other symptoms experienced. I did, however, experience dry mouth, temporary urine retention, blurred vision and confusion. Initially I felt pronounced sedation but either that wore off or I just forgot about it. All of these side effects are typical of anticholinergics, of which scopolamine and DPH are examples. In essence, this is absolutely not something I would do again, nor would I recommend others to try it out. If I were ever curious about what dementia might feel like, from the perspective of the subject, then this I imagine would come close. It's the main reason I did it. All that being said, I'd still not recommend this combination to anyone. Well, it all started in February when my friend and I started using diphenhydramine recreationally. We had heard that it makes you hallucinate and we had read experiences. We stopped using DXM temporarily to make room for DPH. The first time I took 25 tablets of Benadryl, 625 milligrams. The second I took only 22 tablets, 550 milligrams. The third I took 30 tablets, 750 milligrams, and this time, the fourth time, the last time, I took 30 again. It was a week after spring break. I got home from my girlfriend's house at about 11:20 p.m. I called my friend over and we slowly downed the little pink pills. We did this in my room since it had a lock and my parents are quite nosy. I took 30, he took 36. He weighs a bit more than me though, so it was about even. I started my stopwatch as soon as we downed the first set of 10. We had all the pills down as my stopwatch passed the 6-minute mark. We had also consumed 2 Cokes each. As crazy as it may sound, a minute after I had all the pills down, I swear I started hallucinating. A hardcover book appeared to be bending in the corner of my eye. I didn't tell this to my friend because he'd think I was retarded, which at times I am. We went for a walk as my stopwatch approached 10 minutes. We disposed all the boxes and wrappers by dumping them in my neighbor's trash can. We slowly walked back to my house. We both started shaking and shivering, as it was only March and still a bit chilly out. As we approached my house I noticed the downstairs lights were on. I yelled, "Oh shit!" and we started running towards the house. Surely my mother was downstairs. I told her we just went for a walk and we were fine. I told her to go back to bed. I noticed my voice was becoming extremely light and weak. It was on the verge of a whisper. Once she got back to bed, I was much relieved. My friend and I started playing Medieval, Total War, the best game ever. I honestly don't remember it too well, but he says we did. I turned on some soft rock music on low on Winamp. I told him we should lay down until the shock of the DPH left. I actually just wanted to sleep. My voice had turned into a whisper by now, and my body felt like it weighed about 600 pounds. We pulled the futon out from against the wall and extended it into a bed. We decided not to sleep longitudinally on the bed, since we were both very straight. We slept laterally with our legs protruding a good 2 feet from the side of the bed. I grabbed a few blankets and threw them on us, and my friend used my beanbag as a footrest. My state of mind was, in a word, chaotic. Waves of opposing emotions overwhelmed my psyche: fatigue, apathy, paranoia, and feminism. I checked my stopwatch. An hour had passed since we consumed the pills. The lights were off so I didn't get to notice any open-eye hallucinations. My stomach started to ache with a sharp, pulsating sensation. I noticed I could evade the pain by taking deep slow breaths. In my mind I thought I would puke if I stopped breathing slowly and deeply. I felt my heart in complete tachycardia. It was like a bass drum being beaten by an obese boxer from southern Kentucky. Insane as that may sound, those were the exact words that came through my head. I checked my watch again. 6 hours elapsed. That can't be right, I thought. I checked it again. Hello. My watch was talking to me. It didn't strike me as a hallucination but simply as the way things were. No matter what time it was, I had to pee. I would have stayed and talked to the watch, but all that would have come out would be a whisper. And the effort it would have taken would force me into a coma. I slowly stood up. Now I no longer felt heavy. I felt like I was hovering. I had set my glasses by the computer. I walked slowly around the beanbag and put on my glasses. I opened the door and hovered to the bathroom. When I finally arrived in my bathroom, I turned on the lights and began to piss. It kept coming out. It kind of stung, but I wasn't about to complain. I noticed that we now had a black fish in our toilet bowl. It swam aimlessly about inside the toilet. I tried pissing directly at it but it must have taken it the wrong way. It flipped out into the sink. I finished pissing and walked to the sink. It was so real. The fish was still in it, grasping for water. I turned on the faucet to let it breathe. After about 10 seconds, it turned into a very small maple tree that got sucked down the drain. I thought my plumber is going to be pissed about this. I washed my hands and returned to my computer room. I suppose somewhere in my head, I knew a black fish could not live a toilet, nor could it turn into a small maple and be swallowed by my sink. Perhaps it only happened because it was impossible. Perhaps my subconscious awareness of the bounds of reality provoked this visual manifestation. Whatever the cause, it freaked me out. I didn't realize it was a hallucination until I re-entered the computer room and took off my glasses and went back to sleep. Well, I wasn't really sleeping, but that's what I'm calling it, so sue me. Throughout the night I continued making voyages to the bathroom and being confronted by open-eye hallucinations such as ants and spiders swarming out of my vents, a gecko on the mirror, a threat note posted on the bathroom door. It was a strange feeling, having to pee constantly, but never being able to do so in peace. My friend announced he was leaving. I looked at my watch. It was 10 in the morning. I said goodbye and walked upstairs. I had to go to a church trip to Des Moines at noon. I walked into the kitchen looking for food. My mom came and told me we needed to talk. I was worried to say the least. I couldn't tell if I was still messed up or not. We wound up sitting on a couch in my upstairs living room. My mother opened the conversation with, "How much Benadryl did you take last night?" I answered with none, but she looked at me like, "What the hell are you talking about?" She hadn't asked me a thing, but I heard it. I heard the question I didn't want to hear and answered it. She disappeared straight in front of my eyes. I got scared. I looked at my watch again. 9:30. Oh shit. I'm still hallucinating. It was just 10. I looked at the wall clock, which has large numbers, hard to mistake. It was 5:30 in the fucking morning. Maybe my parents were never talking to me. Maybe I could go downstairs and sleep. I got up and made my way downstairs. I never made it. I wound up outside. My parents got me and started yelling at me. My mom forced my dad to take me to the hospital. I told them I was fine, but she insisted. To say the least, the ride to the hospital felt like years. Seriously, years. No exaggeration. It only took about 17 minutes in reality, but I was no longer in reality. In the waiting room I asked for some water because the dry mouth was setting in. My dad got me an Aquafina. I drank a sip and choked on it. I couldn't swallow. I spit it back in the bottle and set it down. I told him I couldn't swallow. Suddenly I was back in my house. I was in my computer room. My mom came down and told me to get back to the hospital. Shit, I'm dreaming. I awoke and I was still at the hospital. I longed to get back to bed with my parents' ignorance, but I was lying back down on a hospital bed with needles in me and sensors all over my body. I saw many hallucinations at the hospital since it was well illuminated with fluorescent bulbs and great windows. At one point I thought I was in Davenport. It was a horrible trip and I can't wait until we get the hospital bill. Joke. It wasn't even that much fun. No, it wasn't any fun. The only reason I did it was to get hallucinations, which scared the fuck out of me. I still hallucinate today, although this was 9 weeks ago. Just small things, of course. I plan to pick up DXM again sometime this summer. I never will do diphenhydramine again. It sucked. Anyways, good luck to all the trippers and druggies. Keep it real, keep it safe, underclock. Time governs us all. Benadryl-induced psychosis. I am going to describe one of the most disturbing experiences of my life, and of my family's, following a very high dosage of diphenhydramine, Benadryl. It started late one night. I was bored and wanted to get high off something. I was feeling depressed and had no access to any other drugs. I have had a lot of experience with psychedelics, so I thought it would be fun to explore a diphenhydramine trip. This was a big mistake. I was alone in my room around 11 o'clock when my family was in bed. I had a full bottle of Benadryl and took 1 gram of Benadryl. 12 o'clock, about an hour later, I was feeling very sedated and I started having mild hallucinations. All the lights were off in my room and I could see the silhouette of objects starting to form in thin air, though I could not ascertain what they were. I also started seeing clear spiders form on my bed, which I did not like because there are brown recluse spiders in my house, and I could not tell if they were real or not. So I turned on the lights. 12:30, this is when my memory went completely blank. I do not remember a thing about the trip during the night, but I know now I was awake the whole time because of the shape of my room in the morning. 7 a.m., this is when things got very scary. I came back to awareness with my mom talking to me on my bed. I could feel I was very intoxicated, but I didn't remember what I took. My mom was very close to my face and looking at me very strangely. Finally she asked what I was on. I told her nothing, but my mental state and body language was very revealing. Being in the middle of a very intense trip, and having my mom aggressively question me and give me very suspicious and threatening looks sent me into a state of paranoia that eventually evolved into a full-blown paranoid psychotic state. 8 a.m. At this point my whole house was aware that I was in an altered state. I was in a state of sheer terror as everyone around me was questioning me and staring at me. I was so wired up with fear, paranoia and disorganized thoughts that my eyelids were pried open, receding nearly into my eye sockets, giving me a psychotic look. My brother, who has seen a lot of psychotic and schizophrenic people while he was homeless, said I had the classic look in my eyes and face of someone suffering with schizophrenia, a look of terror and complete confusion. Accompanied by the insane look in my eyes, I was having paranoid auditory hallucinations of voices and disorganized speech and thought processes. 8 to 9 a.m., at this point I felt nearly brain dead. My short-term memory was completely gone. I would begin a sentence and then completely forget what I was talking about, or one of my family members would ask me something and I would start answering it and then forget what they asked and what I was saying in response. Even worse, I was having vivid auditory hallucinations of my family members saying things to me that they weren't, and the hallucinations were in their tone of voice and mannerisms. I would see their mouths move to what I thought they were saying as well. It was impossible to tell what was real or what was not. I was completely paranoid and kept hearing them saying negative things about me or our relationships. This started a long process of having arguments with my family members about things they did not say. In the midst of the experience I was talking complete gibberish about esoteric ideas one might have during an acid trip, and how they related to subjects or ideas that had no connection to what I was saying or to any conversation I was in the middle of having with my family. My family said the things I was saying were so crazy they could not describe it. The whole time I thought I was making sense. 9 to 10 a.m., my memory at this point became so bad, and my body movements and language were so unnatural and disorganized that my brother began to fear for his life. Because I was lost in a deep psychotic state, he told me afterwards the look on my face was that of the mass murderer James Holmes in one of his lineup photos. My brother armed himself with a Bowie knife because he did not know what I was capable of. My mom was so afraid to enter the room I was in she had to push my brother into it to deal with me. I do not remember much of what the actual experience of the mental state was, but I remember it feeling very much like what I would think someone with schizophrenia or psychosis experiences: no way to differentiate what is real or not, and little awareness of one's actions, thoughts, or words. I believe I was in a drug-induced psychosis. As far as the visual hallucinations, they were very similar to coming up on a shroom trip, with very wavy walls, and moving objects. But the most profound part of the experience was the head state and delusional and disorganized thoughts. 10 to 11 a.m., finally I began to come down off the drug and could make more sense of reality, and my short-term memory came back. I gave up trying to talk to my family because I could not determine if they were really saying anything or not. I looked around my room and I had thrown medication everywhere. I urinated in a chair, on my bed and on the carpet sometime during the night. I feel most sorry for my family who had to watch me literally lose my mind and fear that I might not be sane again. I tried to talk to my brother about the experience a week later to find out what happened. He said it was one of the scariest experiences of his life, and he has witnessed a decapitation. He could not describe the nature of my mental state, or what I was saying. I see it now as one of those experiences where there are very subtle details that are hard to describe, and the experience as a whole was so complex that the depth of its disturbing nature can't be put into words. It took me nearly a week to recover. I was hallucinating for days. I would stop hallucinating for a little while, go to sleep, and then wake up hallucinating again. and feeling like I was back in the same headspace. Luckily the hallucinations and dissociative feelings went away after a week. I will never do Benadryl in high doses again, and I strongly recommend not trying this drug. On retrospect, the experience did give me great insight into what a schizophrenic or psychotic person experiences. It's as if the wires in your brain cross, and the processing of intercommunicating data in your brain mix, and the resulting perceptual experiences and self-expression is idiosyncratic to your surrounding reality and the events taking place. So you are left saying things that you think make sense and have meaning to people that don't exist. You are left hopelessly confused and convinced by the vivid hallucinations and delusions your mind validates. It has also left me with a great sympathy towards psychotic and schizophrenic people, because that state was hellish for me, and for my family. I'm going to start with a little backstory, to really set the scene of where I am now, with the trip I had last with my fiancée. Around 2016, when I was 15, I was on a website where I followed somebody I grew to had a crush on. This person was a huge advocate of Benadryl. Being the lovesick teenager I was, I decided to try it. Once doesn't hurt, right? Well, it didn't. At least not then. That first night I distinctly remember taking around 9 pills, 25 milligrams each. I remember the slide into static, and the sudden heaviness of my body, how hard it was to move and even breath, how I had to pee every couple minutes at it, but when I tried to go I couldn't. Never did get any sort of hallucinations, delusions or delirium, but maybe I wouldn't have noticed anyway. I remember the restlessness of my body, but since it was hard to move I'd struggle to make my muscles cooperate. My racing heart and shaking hands, how I was nauseated but couldn't vomit since I hadn't eaten. The sudden body high that hit me like a wave but left only to come back again within a few minutes, and how music was incredible like it had come from the heavens. I really remember the come down, how I felt floaty and soft. The sleep afterward was a godsend, as I have insomnia. That night I crashed hard for a solid 14 hours and had the most intense, trippy dreams. Something to notice that my brain and body are wired in strange ways, and all of this was extremely pleasant to me, even euphoric. The only part I disliked was the dry mouth, but I was drinking water like a champion, so it didn't matter much. In short, I loved it. So naturally I continued on with my habit, dosing usually before bed. But this slowly became something I did more and more and higher doses. I would begin to go through a sort of pseudo-withdrawal without it, a irritable state that came with shakiness, nausea, hot flashes and a really runny nose. I don't think I was addicted then, but my body started to act like it was. I begun to take in around 150 milligrams, my manageable dose, before school or during school, mostly after school at the very least. I was taking it almost every day at this point and was so tolerant that I could fight through the brain fog and slurred speech to talk to people extremely well. I honestly don't know anybody knew I had a problem at all. I don't think I ever truly experienced hallucinations or delusions, but I'm 100% sure I wouldn't know the difference looking back if I had it. It's very likely that I did, it just never realized, and because I wasn't a social person at all, nobody was around to tell me so or send me to psych for my loss of sanity. Nobody was around really. My parents worked until 6 p.m. each night and I would come home, take 200 to 300 milligrams, tell them I was tired because of school and simply lock myself in my room and listen to music until I fell asleep. Nobody was there to check up on me in any way, and I had got so well at hiding it that I'm not sure if they could have seen through it regardless. Between 6 to 8 months after this began, I experienced a lot of severe short-term memory issues and would have a hard time holding conversations, but it was nothing out of the ordinary for me as I was diagnosed with ADHD, so people assumed it was that more than anything. I was still dosing nearly every day I think, but began to wonder if I had a problem because I couldn't remember the days as they went by. The brain fog kind of got worse and worse, and it was around the 1-year mark that people took real notice. I would literally act like a Xanax zombie on autopilot through my days, still dosing 150 milligrams min. Through the week. Beyond the tipping point, I can't recall that period of my life with clarity. It's all hazy, static and very much blanked in my mind. I do kind of remember doctor's visits, psych appointments, meetings with specialists, etc., but I can't remember any specifics. Don't know if I was still dosing daily by then. Skip to 1 year and 6 or 7 months, and I remember I wasn't dosing anymore. But the effects were bad. I think I went through physical withdrawal, all of the side effects of it afflicting me for weeks on end, getting better each day. But it was a slow process. The brain fog was terrible, short-term memory was wasted, My thoughts were mud and slow, and my kidney were totally fucked up at this point. Not to mention the other side effects I had, there's too many to list and I honestly have forgot some. The physical and mental effects I had then do still affect me today too. I was actually diagnosed with brain damage and told it was pretty much really likely that I'd get dementia in my life because of the type of damage I had made my brain. My short-term memory did improve, doing daily mental stuff helped as well as time. My kidneys, well, they'll never be the same and I get recurring infections due to because of scarring from chronic dehydration. During that whole time I wasn't drinking enough water and more often than not I had diarrhea, while I put my body through the Benadryl ringer. Overall, it was a 2-year-long descent into a type of living hell and I would say I regret it if I didn't love that fall so damn much. Skip forward to last night, I'm 20 now, and much of the damage done back then won't be undone ever pretty much, but luckily I'm alive and functioning well enough to write this, though it's taking me much longer than I would like because I keep getting distracted and forgetting that I'm writing it at all, but me and my fiancé have a penchant for doing things we shouldn't. I told the whole story of my Benadryl years to them, and explained that the damage I did to myself and all of that, but I often find myself missing it. Of course they asked discussion on how it felt, with me explaining it's hard to truly understand unless you've done it yourself. They eventually suggested we do a small dose, and I, being the nostalgic idiot I am, agreed. D+0. 525 mg DPH ingested in pill form, along with 1 mg Klonopin and 10 mg of DXM in the form of Dayquil at 11:04 p.m. D+30 minutes. Feeling from the nothing yet, talking with my fiancé on Discord, feeling extremely happy and listening to Mosh by Eminem on loop. We're talking about what to expect from a first-time dose and what to do if anything goes south, and since I'm the experienced one, in my mind, the trip sitter, though obviously if possibly please have a sober trip sitter for any first times, I'm trying to everything the best I can and I'm telling them to just relax into it. D+50 minutes. Finally feeling something, a tingly feeling in my feet moving upward and a slight nausea, a bit of a head spin, nothing serious and I know this is expected for me. D+1 hour and 25 minutes. Beginning to feel my beloved sense of body heaviness, along with an extremely relaxed emotional stare. I feel like the world is pure euphoria and I want to experience this forever, but I know it won't last. Still nauseous and beginning to get bad head spins, weird chest sensation is happening. D+1 hour and 45 minutes. I'm just happy, still listening to Eminem Mosh. Really euphoric, body heaviness still happening, beginning to get restless leg. Craving something cold like ice but too comfortable to get up. Nausea went away, head spins are slight now and my heart rate is pumped up a bit but nothing dangerous. D+2 hours. I think I lost time or had a memory lapse. It does happen to me even when not on DPH. Whatever else I took so I'm not worried, just disappointed at the lost time. D+2 hours and 20 minutes. I decided I'm gonna play Borderlands, and keep relaxing into this feeling. Me and my fiancé are having a really nice time talking about our love/hate lists, something we came up with to list stuff we love or hate. I'm feeling really relaxed, happy, possibly some type of body euphoria and beginning to have brain fog but it's not frustrating. My legs are aching and my vision is slightly blurry. I think I'm also having a hot flash. D+2 hours and 50 minutes. My fiancé decided to go to bed, I'm still playing Borderlands. Still experiencing previous symptoms but they're fading quite quickly. D+3 hours and 30 minutes. Previous sensations faded, I'm feeling pretty empty now, yet still a sense of calm is surrounding me. Still playing Borderlands, but the brain fog fucked me up for a while there. I feel like my bladder is going to burst but I haven't been able to urinate this whole time. We'll try again but not expecting much. D+4 hours and 45 minutes. All symptoms totally faded, in the afterglow now. Overall a smooth trip, not one of my most exciting. The Klonopin eased any anxiety symptoms away and allowed me to enjoy a body high with some mental alteration, including euphoria and a memory lapse. Ending trip report at 3:45 a.m. never got drowsy at all, despite being very relaxed and heavy feeling. Now it's 7:47 a.m. and I'm finalizing my previous story and trip report. Decided not to fix spelling errors, grammar mistakes, etc. because it's just kind of how I have to type now with my brain damage. I think. Maybe it's important for people to know the long-term damage it can do. Will I be using Benadryl again? I feel it's inevitable for me. My experiences and my life and my story. I wouldn't change a single damn thing, because I love this drug, I really do. Have always had a fascination with diphenhydramine. When I was about 16 I remember taking 125 to 150 milligrams doses and try to see how long I could stay awake before I had to submit to unconsciousness. A few months ago I had taken a 225 milligrams dose to see if I could get some of the hallucinogenic. I've since learned that it's more of a delirium, qualities of the drug to come out. I would have taken more, but the only thing I had at my house was Tylenol PM, which also contains a high amount of acetaminophen, which can be very toxic at higher levels. The experience mostly consisted of extreme drowsiness and some slight visual distortions in the corner of my eyes. But it was more like the light show I get when I press on the outside of my eyelids than an actual hallucination. 2 days ago I bought a bottle of Benadryl at the store, 125 small red pills each containing 25 milligrams of mind-altering diphenhydramine. I wasn't planning on using them immediately, but later that night I decided what the hell, and started to dose up. 11 o'clock, I take my first dose, 275 milligrams. 11:15, I decide that 275 milligrams is going to be pretty weak, and I want to get the most kick I can get out of this experience. I take 75 milligrams more. 11:20, I decide to hell with it and take 50 milligrams more, making the total 400 milligrams. 11:30, I smoke my last cigarette, still not feeling even the slightest effects from the drug, not even drowsiness. I am a long-time recreational user of hallucinogenic drugs, acid, psychedelic mushrooms, Jimsonweed, and a few others, and I know that I am going to need more smokes for this trip. I figure that the drugs haven't kicked in at all yet, so I have at least a half hour to drive to the local 24-hour supermart to pick up some smokes. Hero would note, driving while intoxicated, tripping, or extremely sleep-deprived is dangerous and irresponsible because it endangers other people. Don't do it. 11:37, I see the first mirage, which may not have been from the drugs but simply from the poorly lit road, of people walking the sidewalks ahead. All I can see is their silhouettes. As I get closer, I see that they are stationary road signs. 11:40, I arrive at the supermart, still no effects of the drugs. I walk in, buy my smokes, leave. 11:45, I get back into my car and turn on one of my favorite albums, Mars Volta, Deloused, and start to drive home while smoking a cigarette. I'm still not feeling any effects from the drug. 11:53, I'm about half a mile from the turn to the road up which I live when I start to feel a little heaviness in my head, kind of like someone really gently pulling my head back to the headrest of my car seat. As I get closer to the turn, I start to get kind of a tunnel vision effect. I haven't changed speed but it feels like it's taking forever. As I make the turn I decide to be extra careful so I don't go into the ditch, and the turn seems like I make a complete 360-degree turn even though it's only been 90 degrees. On the way up the road I begin to experience the earlier sensation of dark silhouettes walking beside my car, but once I get closer I can see that they are just stationary road signs. I make the turn into my house and it feels like another long turn. I go inside my house and lay on my bed, turning off all the lights and turning on a TV show I had recorded with a strong music soundtrack, as I had heard that diphenhydramine increases music awareness. I begin to see the mirages. First it seems like another TV screen materializes in the air next to the real one. It's playing a different TV show which I could clearly see at the time, but I can't recall now. The room is spinning a little bit, but not making me dizzy. It was kind of like there were flashlights floating around the room, pointing at my eyes. I start to see a lot more visual distortions, just bright lights out of the corner of my eyes. When I turn to look directly at them, they're gone. 1:45, I look at the TV to notice the show I had been watching is into its third episode. It's been that long already? The visual distortions are starting to get very disorientating. I fear that I haven't reached the peak of the high and decide I just want to go to sleep, as the trip is starting to feel very uncomfortable. I still haven't had a cigarette since my drive home. I know it's very cold outside and I'm afraid I might fall to sleep out there, and a cigarette doesn't really seem that appealing at the moment anyway. I close my eyes and start to drift in and out of consciousness. My eyes are closed but the TV is still on and I can still clearly see the television and the rest of the room through my closed eyes, although the TV show playing on my eyelids is a different one than what was really playing on the TV, but I didn't notice that at the time. I come back to reality and jolt awake, although I'm not sure if I was really asleep or just hallucinating before this, and realize that I wasn't watching the TV, that I've had my eyes closed. I start to doze off again and close my eyes. The TV screen reappears inside of my mind. I touch my eyelids to make sure they are closed, and they are. I start having severe moments of paranoia and depression. Just for about a few minutes at a time, I start thinking angry thoughts about my friends and my girlfriends, that they are evil and they are trying to play me. After a few minutes of this it goes away and I feel normal again, but it repeats a couple of times. At this point the twitching starts. I've never had these effects ever before and they were horribly uncomfortable. Laying on my back with my head on the pillow, my right leg begins to feel restless. Every 2 to 3 minutes I get an irresistible urge to twitch my right leg. And when I say twitch, I don't mean a little twitch, I mean a big tremor, like I was trying to kick a field goal or something. This continues every 2 to 3 minutes for about a half hour until I conclude that I'm not going to be able to get asleep from just closing my eyes. I decide that this trip has gone bad and it's time to abort. I get up and move to the bathroom and induce vomiting, throwing up the contents of my stomach. In the water, I can clearly see the 16 almost completely dissolved Benadryl tablets floating in the water. This terrifies me for some reason, and I quickly flush the toilet and walk to the sink to wash my mouth out. This is the first real detailed hallucination I see. As I look down towards the drain, I can clearly see a number pad on the drain, like the kind you see on movies attached to a nuclear warhead or something. I cock my head and look at it again, and I can still see it clearly, but I realize that it's just a hallucination now and not really there. I go back and lay on my bed and try to enjoy the rest of the visual distortions, taking comfort in the knowledge that I won't get any higher since I ejected the rest of the pills from my stomach. After about 45 minutes of laying in comfort, although I still had the leg twitches, I came back to reality in a sudden, and looked around the room, realizing that I was almost back in touch with reality. I stand up and walk around the room, and just feel a little loopy, like I was carsick or something. I try to go to sleep but I still have the leg tremors, but after massaging the muscles in my leg for a moment, they go away and I'm able to get to sleep. Conclusion: Diphenhydramine is a very interesting drug. The trip seemed very scary at the time. The visual distortions weren't like LSD or shrooms, where they flow like water. It was more like they just appeared and disappeared all of the sudden. I could relate it most to gyms and weed. The whole experience was a lot like dreaming while still awake. It's the next day now, and I still feel the restless sensation in my right leg, although it hasn't tremored at all. It just feels odd. I also feel slightly nauseous. The world seems to have a slight touch of reality to it, but I often feel that way after using hallucinogens. I will probably try diphenhydramine one more time somewhere in the future, but not in this high of a dose. Maybe 200 to 225 milligrams. I would definitely say that anyone who is a fan of taking a glimpse of insanity, as I am, to try this at least once. A little under a week ago, I made a rather thoughtless decision to mix diphenhydramine and diphenhydranate. I have done both drugs separately, and I enjoyed the trips thoroughly. Both can be very interesting and quite intense if taken in appropriate doses. I've tried almost all of the other hallucinogens. I'd consider myself experienced. And I remember when a friend first told me about diphenhydramine. I laughed, and thought, what kind of person would take over-the-counter sleeping pills to trip? Well, as I have a curious mind, I was always open to new experiences. After experiencing with lower and medium doses, I thought I was ready to try taking a large dose of both diphenhydramine and diphenhydranate. I stopped at the local drugstore, and picked up a box which contained 24 IV nighttime sleep aid pills which contained 25 mg of diphenhydramine per pill, and also a box which contained 8 pills of Dramamine original containing 50 mg of diphenhydranate per pill. That night, I felt I was in generally a pretty sane mind state before ingesting. At around 11 p.m., I took the 32 pills, and sat anxiously awaiting for the trip to come on. It came on pretty quickly, which was a variance from the other times I have done the two separately, when it'd usually take half an hour to an hour before I'd feel any feelings. About 15 to 20 minutes after I ingested the pills, I began feeling the heavy effect, which I was accustomed to. The first hallucination that I noticed was one that I have come across the other times I've done diphenhydramine/diphenhydranate. It looked like there were bugs crawling under my arms. I never scratched them, just stared in amazement. I was enjoying the feelings. The walls were breathing, and the ceiling looked like it was slowly falling. Throughout this period, I was able to distinguish that I was on a drug, and that although it looked realistic, it wasn't real and was just a hallucination. Time seemed to be moving pretty fast. It had been an hour since I took the pills. I remember my uncle was in the basement watching the television, which I had forgot about 3 times, as I moved to sit in his chair to find him sitting there, startling me. I remember hearing someone call my name, and shouting "What?" only to hear my uncle reply, "No one called you." I was listening to metal by Pink Floyd, and enjoying it quite thoroughly. Music can just be amazing when on the two drugs. After nearly an hour and a half, I noticed that it was getting hard to breathe, and I came to the conclusion that I had taken too much. I had contemplated just puking, because it was becoming rather intense. I must have suffered amnesia, because I completely forgot about it nearly 3 seconds after saying it. At around 1 o'clock, my uncle went upstairs to go to bed, which was sort of a relief. He was attempting to talk to me, and I remember my voice was slurred to the point of sounding like an absolute drunkard. I avoided conversation by saying many times. After he left, I turned off all the lights, because from my experience, I had more full-blown hallucinations in the dark. I lit up a cigarette, and then it fell out of the ashtray, and I looked on the floor to find absolutely nothing there. I was smoking an imaginary cigarette. I didn't seem to find that illogical at all, and continued to sit. At this point, the auditory hallucinations became overwhelming, as I heard my name being called on numerous occasions, and replied. I looked into the laundry room, and at this point, the water softener began speaking to me. I was carrying on a conversation with it like that was completely normal. It was around this point that I forgot I was on drugs, and thus, all contact with reality of any form. I noticed that I was forgetting to breathe, but my heart was beating to no end. I was beginning to become terrified, as I was seeing hands reaching out of the walls, trying to grab me. With most other hallucinogens, with several exclusions, I was able to tell that it was an illusion, but with diphenhydramine and diphenhydramine, everything appeared to be so real. I was seeing people walk into my basement, then walk right into a wall and disappear. I was scared. I remember at one point seeing a group of my friends just staring at me. I replied, "What are you looking at?" And they'd just disappear. I remember seeing my cleaning lady and another woman asking me what I was doing, to which I replied, "Just chillin' like a villain." However, I was not prepared at all for what happened next. In a complete drug haze, I looked down at my arms. I was expecting to see the similar bugs crawling under my skin. But, what I saw is something that absolutely made me jump out of my chair. On my arm was a humongous poisonous Amazon spider. It bit my arm, which I felt. Blood started to profusely flow out of my arm. I began shaking my arms uncontrollably. After shaking them for a minute or two, I looked again, and I saw what was either a baby spider or a tick crawling on my arm. I hate spiders. I hate insects for that matter. I was absolutely terrified. I remember screaming in pain. I looked down at my arm, and saw that not only had the spider bit me once, but numerous times, as I saw bite marks going up and down my arm. Around this time, it was near 2 a.m., a guesstimate, as I lost all track of time. It was at this point that I have no recollection of what happened after that. Which was probably a good thing, as I can only imagine it progressed into worse things. I have absolutely no recollection of how I wound up in my bed, or what I may have done. I woke up the next day at around 10:30 a.m., still feeling mild effects from the drugs. I remember the first thing I did was look at my arms to look at the spider bites, only to find nothing there at all. I remember talking to a few friends that said I was talking to them the night before at around 2:30. I looked at a log manager on AIM, and read some of the conversation. I was writing in all caps, and not making any sense whatsoever. Some things I found myself saying. Beside her in Alaska, where are reners when you need 'em? Among many other very fucked up nonsensical things. I would never recommend trying to take as much as I did. I overdosed. I am not aware of the lethal dose, but I can't imagine this was a healthy dose. The trip was not enjoyable, as I found myself terrified throughout most of it. Up to 4 days afterwards, I was experiencing hallucinations at nighttime, and I found myself unable to sleep. The fourth night afterwards, I was laying in bed, still hearing auditory hallucinations. I was hearing children screaming, and it was echoing off the crest of a tsunami wave. I then opened my eyes, and there was a face sticking out of my wall. I regret taking the amount I did, as I wasn't even sure if I'd ever be able to return to sanity. My pupils were dilated to the max for almost 5 days after taking it. For now I'm just going to stick to the illegal hallucinogens. This submission is rather lengthy, so I separated my stories within this article. Story 1. I have long been an OTC junkie of sorts and searched lots of websites on information on obtaining legal highs. I've exceeded the dosage on my ADD pills, and I've also experimented with DXM before and was somewhat disappointed. I would take 20-something gel caps and or chug a bottle of couch medicine at once and end up with unexpected results. It was like feeling drunk in a bad way, and things such as wooden doors seemed drippy with the occasional sight of colors. Well, one day after a day of summer school without weed, I remember talking to my friend Ted about how Dramamine can get you high. I researched this and eventually became more interested in doing Benadryl over this, although I don't remember exactly how. Anyway, I was bored, so I decided to raid my medicine cabinet and found a cocktail of OTCs. I started by taking 15 Benadryls, 375 mg, 5 Concerta pills, 36 mg each, then chugging a bottle of cough syrup along with 16 gel caps of DXM. Note, I had already taken 2 Concertas that morning as usual. After about 30 minutes or less I felt the DXM hit me, but a little differently this time. I was sitting at my desk talking to a friend on AIM about what I did. I saw some interesting visuals, but nothing major. My bed appeared to be floating and I saw flashes of colors in my peripheral vision. This was really cool and I was pretty excited about this. However, it didn't take long for the drugs to overcome me, and about an hour or so after taking all of this I got really tired and dozed off to sleep. When I woke up the next morning I had the most intense, realistic experience of my life concerning any drug I have ever taken. I don't think that I could describe to you how intense it was. My head felt normal and I felt completely fine. I was very disappointed that I fell asleep and I was awake earlier than usual. I started thinking really hard and trying to trip in a sort of way, and it all progressively came on. I was staring at my ceiling and noticed a few flies on it. Nothing unusual, I thought. For some reason, I started thinking about how all these flies formed on the window in the movie The Exorcist, and wouldn't you know it, millions of them started forming and spreading across my ceiling. My paranoia of bugs made me think they were crawling on me and I started itching frantically. After a little bit, this wore off. I decided to get ready for school, so I turned on the light next to my bedstand and got startled a little. The shadows cast from the lights formed outlines of demons, demon eyes, demon bodies, demon faces with horns. I saw at least 10 or 20 demon shadows in my room. Since this always kind of interested me, though I was slightly intrigued yet a little shaken. I shook it off as a coincidence, but then things intensified. I noticed millions of little orbs and rods flying across my room from the hallway back and forth. Literally millions. But I really could only see them as flashes of light at first, and then kind of vibrated my eyes back and forth to clearly see them. Still, I was intrigued, being the supernatural enthusiast that I am. Not that I wasn't scared. I was still reasonably calm considering what was happening, but my heart was pounding pretty hard. What happened next was what really scared the shit out of me. I walked out into the kitchen to get a drink, and in the window was an alien. Kind of what you'd see in pictures, except this one stared at me with evil eyes. He kept shape-shifting too. Sometimes he'd have horns, other times he wouldn't. His bone structure would shift, and he was eventually accompanied by a midget hooded alien looking just as evil. You'd think this would be funny, but to see it plain as day staring at you is pretty scary. After this I freaked out completely. I woke my parents up and told them what I saw, and I looked right at them, but they didn't see anything. I was spazzing out, somewhat, yelling, "How the hell can you not see them?" After that I walked back in my room and walked up to one of my windows. In the reflection I saw a decapitated baby arm laying next to my feet and a demon eating it. I remember kicking on the ground and actually feeling the arm too. I told my parents that I only took some cold medicine the previous night, which they believed. My parents had me stay home from school that day and called my grandma to come over and watch me for the day as well. They said my pupils were huge. I saw aliens everywhere. In every reflection, every shadow, every pattern, there was some form of an alien. I even watched The Simpsons and there were animated aliens in the cartoon. I asked my dad for the digital camera too, and I took pictures of what I saw. When I looked through the lens facing my backyard, there were hundreds of them walking around casually. Some were calm and nice while others were scary/evil looking. When I'd take a picture of them, it'd show up different than when I first saw them. They'd change shape in the picture and then again when I looked at the picture again. Sometimes they smiled or posed in funny ways, which eased my tensions a little bit. My grandma definitely helped out a lot. She told me to just relax and calm down and prayed for me too. She's very religious. It was kinda weird when I did this, because when I relaxed, the evil look on their faces instantly transformed into a smile and the alien would disappear and a new one would spawn. It was kind of like in one of those movies where people fall in love and it plays that stupid classic love song. Well, the rest of the day wasn't much different. I laid down and saw reflections of aliens on my shoulders, and occasionally I'd feel slimy hands touching me, but as long as I relaxed I kept it under control and was eventually able to sleep. I went to the doctor's office and my counselor that day as well and was told I'd be fine and just needed to relax/sleep/rest/ that sort of thing. I also saw this weird shadow of a gnome holding a knife as well. That day was pretty scary, but I also saw some funny things too. The first evil alien I saw in my kitchen window at one point was holding and smoking a crack pipe. I also saw an alien having sex with a chipmunk next to the shed in my backyard. I was still shaken though, and every reflection and shadow held an image of an alien. I know this is a highly unusual experience, but it actually happened. I went to bed and the next morning the hallucinations were gone. What a relief. Story 2. Okay, well, being the smart person that I am, I decided to try Benadryl again. I bought some at my local pharmacy and was ecstatic. I decided to take it alone this time with the exception of my daily dose of 236 mg Concertas. I did it before a youth group at my church, figuring this would provide a good trip this time. I arrived an hour early to church and already took the Benadryls, 500 mg all at once, and decided to take a walk into the backwoods behind the church as I usually do. There is a trail that leads to a field about 200 yards back. I lit up a cigar and smoked about half of it while I was back there and cranked my MP3 player to techno music and a little grunge. I was feeling a nice cigar buzz as normal and it was getting dark, so I started walking back. I stopped where I could see the church and was at the opening of the field. I called up my friend about something completely erroneous and started tripping while on my cell phone. I saw some aliens again, but this time I just laughed because I was used to it and didn't care much. I saw the outline of the Grim Reaper in the trees and didn't care much either. Hell, I was having a blast. I still had a cigar in my hand and some other kids were walking towards me, so I stuffed it in my pocket, it burned out, and casually paced. The girl among the two commented on my shirt, which was cool and made me happy cause she was pretty hot. I started walking back and thought I saw my friend walking with a cop, but it turned out to be his girlfriend, which was very weird. I sat down in the church when I got back and saw fun stuff. The floor was moving and people's reflections in one of the windows by me were acting completely different from what the actual people were doing, and it was really funny. Sometimes there were reflections of people/things that weren't actually there. I really enjoyed it this time though. Go figure. The only problem I had that night was that the pastor's son kept shoving green Play-Doh in my hair and telling me I smelled like smoke, which I did badly, but didn't faze me too much. I went to bed and took 600 mg the next morning before school. I saw similar stuff. Mostly moving floors and shifting patterns, no aliens though. Both of these times were fun, but it ended by 9th period. I was tired and took a nap when I got home. The second and third time were wicked fun, probably because I got used to it and I didn't mix it with DXM or something like that. I should also state that I've smoked lots of marijuana in my past, smoked cigarettes/cigars, sniffed pain pills, a little coke, a tiny bit of shrooms, very bad cow dung shrooms, done DXM a few times, had incredibly high amounts of caffeine in the form of coffee and pills together, taken 12+ ADD pills at once, with caffeine too, and have drank a lot of alcohol. My tolerance for drugs is pretty high from all of this, and possible genealogy, not to mention that I'm a considerably heavy guy.